It wasn't the sirens that started it all. It wasn't the missing person flyer, or even the way the nightmares kept pulling me out of sleep before dawn. No, it was the dog, my dog, Atlas, who hadn't worked a real case in years, gray in the muzzle, stiff in the joints, who was supposed to be living the quiet life now. But on that muggy July morning, when Atlas tore off down the muddy trail along the Columbia River, moving like a dog half his age, my whole body froze up with the same old fear, the kind you get the moment you realize you're not just on a walk. You're chasing a ghost. You know what I mean? One minute you're expecting a peaceful morning, maybe spot a couple of geese, wave at a jogger, and the next, you're running after a German shepherd who's acting like he just clocked back in. Atlas didn't hesitate. He bolted down the embankment, sliding through wet grass, and before I could even catch my breath, he plunged straight into the river. The Columbia isn't the kind of river you play around with. It's cold, it's fast, it's the kind of place where things disappear and only sometimes come back. Watching him swim, determined, I knew right away this wasn't about chasing a duck or a stick. This was memory. Atlas had found something, and it was bad. He dragged something heavy to shore, something waterlogged and rectangular, a suitcase, the kind that doesn't belong out there. The stench hit me before I even got close, sweet and metallic, with that undercurrent of rot that tells you whatever's inside, you don't want to see it. But I had to look. With shaky hands, I unzipped the case halfway. A child's pink blanket, stained and soaked. A tiny shoe, pressed up against the edge. My throat closed. Atlas just sat there, eyes locked on the case like he'd never left the job. Radio in one hand, I called for backup, my voice tight, barely holding it together. Darnell from my old shift pulled up in his cruiser 10 minutes later, took one look at Atlas and the suitcase, and just said, "You thinking what I'm thinking?" I nodded, barely able to speak. Madison Lake. 8 years ago, a 6-year-old girl went missing. Atlas and I searched for days. He led me right to this stretch of river back then, barking and digging, but we found nothing. That case never left me. Guess it never left Atlas either. Forensics took over, bagged up the suitcase, and I sat on the bumper of my SUV, Atlas's head in my lap, just staring at the water. The guilt, the old sense of failure, it all came rushing back. When the examiner told me the remains belonged to a child younger than Madison, maybe 3 or 4, the chill in my spine was worse than anything I'd felt in years. We weren't just reopening an old wound. We'd stumbled onto something bigger, something ongoing. Back at the station, I pulled out every old file I could find. Madison's, Julian's, Levi's, all kids who vanished within 10 miles of the river, all summer disappearances, all labeled as drownings or runaways, all quietly shelved and forgotten. Except Atlas hadn't forgotten, and apparently neither had I. Going through the old case photos, I noticed something I'd never seen before, the same man in the background. Middle-aged, bearded, fishing vest, showing up near at least 3 separate disappearances, just out of focus enough to seem harmless. That night, I couldn't sleep. Atlas paced the house, restless, so we drove upriver. He led me to another suitcase, this one buried near an old dock. It was empty, except for a bracelet, tiny, engraved with the name Jules. Not Madison, not Julian, another kid, another heartbreak. It was like the river had started giving up its secrets, one suitcase at a time. The next few days blurred together. Atlas and I found more, an old drainage culvert with a waterlogged dress, a drawing signed "My Name Jules." Forensics tied everything back to different missing kids, but the most chilling discovery came from a maintenance shed near an abandoned church by the river, a stack of notebooks, dates, locations, initials, all cross-referenced with the disappearances. Whoever kept those logs had been at it for decades, always summer, always near water, always hiding in plain sight. We traced the abandoned church to a man named Leonard Fry, retired prison chaplain, bought the property in 2017. Seemed harmless. But handwriting in the notebooks didn't match him. Someone else had been using his church, and nobody asked questions. It all felt too big, too tangled. But then I started to see it: community events, fairs, church picnics, always the same faces in the crowd. One old-timer at the diner called him Pastor J, said he always smelled like gasoline, always sat in the back, always wore that vest. The logs led us to a retired fair coordinator, John Marshall, 72, lived alone, matched every eyewitness sketch. When Atlas and I showed up at his trailer, He wasn't even surprised. "You dig long enough. You always find bones," he said, smirking like the river had been his hiding place all along. But it wasn't over. His nephew showed up with a shotgun, tried to run us off, but Atlas leapt in, took a bullet to the side but still brought him down. Backup swarmed the place minutes later. Inside the trailer, we found locks of hair, photo negatives, evidence that made even the toughest officers sick. DNA matched at least 5 cold cases. Marshall had used the river as his cover, year after year, confident nobody would look beyond the water. But Atlas had never stopped searching. Even wounded, he was there with me at the town memorial as candles floated down the river, and for the first time, families found a shred of peace. People came by the station to thank us, for Atlas, for never letting go, for finally breaking the silence. Kids drew pictures of my old dog with a hero's cape. But the truth is, we didn't solve it alone. The river never gave up its dead. It just waited for someone stubborn enough to keep asking questions. So here's what I'm left with. Sitting on my porch, Atlas finally asleep at my feet, a breeze in the pines. How many stories never get told because the river, or the town, or even the police just let it go? How many kids are still missing because nobody dug deep enough, or listened to the only ones who never give up? Sometimes it takes a dog to show you the truth, sometimes it takes years. But eventually, the silence breaks. And when it does, you've got to be ready to face whatever comes out of the water. So, what do you think? Was justice served? Or is there still more we should be asking? What would you have done if you were in my shoes or Atlas's paws? Let's talk about it in the comments. And if this story moved you or reminded you of a bond you've had with a dog, I hope you'll share your thoughts and subscribe for more true stories that need to be told. If you told me that a month after the arrests, with the river finally giving up its ghosts, I'd be able to sleep through the night again, I might have believed you, but it didn't work out that way. Truth is, some stories refuse to end, even when the last page seems turned. Because for every person who found closure, another was left picking through the ashes, looking for answers that didn't make the 6 o'clock news. And me? I was one of them. Atlas, too. Healing? Yeah, but he still woke up at the smallest sound, ears flicking, eyes searching the shadows, like he knew the work wasn't finished. The town changed. For a while, it was quiet. People nodded at me in the market. Some looked away. The mayor's commendation hung on my office wall, but it felt like an old birthday card, appreciated, but hollow. Then, about 5 weeks after the trial, a woman showed up at the station. Dark hair, faded jeans, the kind of cautious step you see in folks who've lost more than they let on. She said her name was Erin Carter. She was Julia's mother, Jules, the little girl from the bracelet. She wanted to thank me, but her eyes held something more. Fear? Hope? Maybe both. We sat in my office with the doors shut, the sounds of typing and phones fading into the background. Erin told me things that never made it into any official file, about Julia's nightmares before she vanished, about the strange man who kept coming to the Sunday markets, about how the town never really believed her daughter had simply wandered off. They made me feel crazy, she whispered. But you, and that dog of yours, you proved I wasn't. Atlas lay quietly at her feet, but I saw the way his head tilted, listening, connecting pieces. Erin slid a small envelope across the desk. You need to see this, she said. Inside were 3 Polaroids, taken the week before Julia disappeared. In each, background faces blurred, but there, plain as day, was John Marshall. But in the third shot, his arm rested on the shoulder of a young boy, maybe 5 or 6, face turned away from the camera. That's not Julia, I said softly. Erin shook her head. No, that's Tommy Rivas. He went missing a year before my daughter. They never connected the 2 cases. My stomach turned. I ran Tommy's name through every database I could access, and sure enough, his case was labeled presumed accidental drowning. But now, holding that photo, it felt like a dam broke open in my mind. How many parents, how many lives, had just slipped through the cracks because no one bothered to link the faces in the background? I dug deeper. Spent nights off-duty scanning old yearbooks, local news archives, crime logs, anything. Sometimes Atlas would nudge me away from the computer, reminding me to eat, to sleep, to remember the world still spun beyond cold case files. Other times, we'd walk the riverbanks together, flashlight beams sweeping across water that looked so calm, you'd never guess what it hid. One evening, as the sun set orange over the fields, Atlas froze by a sycamore near Willow Creek. pawing at the roots. Buried in the mud was a tiny action figure Superman, faded, missing a hand. It matched the description from Tommy Rivas's case. Coincidence? Maybe. But it felt like the past reaching up, asking to be seen. Here's where things get strange. A week later, I got an anonymous letter, typewritten and signed, but with details nobody outside the investigation could possibly know. It said, "You're looking at the wrong man." Marshall wasn't the only one who knew where the river ran deepest. There was an address scribbled at the bottom, 404 Maple, a rundown boarding house at the edge of town. My gut said call for backup, but I just grabbed my badge, slipped Atlas's vest on, and drove out in the rain. The place looked abandoned, but someone was home. An old man, thin, pale, hand shaking, eyes darting from me to Atlas. I told them, he rasped, but nobody listened. He wasn't a suspect, more like a witness lost in the noise. He talked about a group, not a ring, not a cult, just a handful of men, all older now, who kept secrets for each other since the 80s. The river took what we gave it, he whispered, voice cracking. But Marshall, he got greedy. Started collecting things, trophies, you know? That's when people noticed. I pressed for names, details, anything. He gave me initials, stories, fragments of memories that led nowhere and everywhere at once. It was like trying to solve a puzzle with pieces from 3 different boxes. Still, his words stuck with me. The river's not done, and neither are the men who use it. I went back to Patel, my friend from Missing Persons, laid out what I'd learned. She frowned, flipping through her own stack of unsolved files. "You're saying there's more out there, and some of them might still be alive?" she asked. "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied. "And we need to start digging before summer's over." For the next month, we worked the case from every angle. Interviews, ground searches, DNA requests, knocking on doors of men who'd grown old behind a wall of small-town silence. Some denied everything. Some cried. One man tried to run. Atlas brought him down, gentle but firm, as if he understood what was at stake. Forensics connected him to a set of fibers found in the 2010 case of a missing boy. One more secret surfaced. The twist came in August, when a girl, alive, scared, but alive, was found at a rest stop 2 towns over. She'd escaped from a storage unit, claimed she was held by a friend of the river, but wouldn't say more. Her story reopened every wound, forced the town to face the fact that monsters don't always leave the way you expect. Sometimes they blend in. Sometimes they're neighbors, even kin. We brought her home. Aaron Carter and the other families met her, and in that moment, I saw something I hadn't seen all summer: hope. Not the kind you get from a mayor's speech or a headline, but real hope, built on the fact that the river's secrets, no matter how old, could still come up for air. On the anniversary of the first discovery, the town gathered again by the river. Atlas, older now but still burning with purpose, sat by my side. Children ran, laughter cutting through the hush. Erin pressed her daughter's bracelet into my palm. "You brought her home," she said, voice trembling, even if it was only her name. And in that moment, surrounded by survivors and mourners, cops and kids and dogs, I realized that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do isn't solving the crime. It's refusing to stop searching, refusing to accept silence. So what do you think? When is enough enough? Is justice catching every last monster? Or is it making sure the ones left behind are finally seen and heard? Tell me your thoughts. Drop a comment. Start a debate. Because in a world that wants to move on, sometimes it's the ones who refuse to forget who change everything. And if you want to hear more stories like this, you know where to find us. And trust me, Atlas will be right here, ready to listen.